Hello everyone and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including some big signings over in Boston, Minnesota, a couple of injury updates from around the NHL, plus some trade rumors involving the Seattle Kraken, the Arizona Coyotes, and the Winnipeg Jets. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. I'll kick things off today by discussing a few signings that have happened recently, and these signings were more important than most of the ones we've had over the past little while. And we'll start over in the Eastern Conference with Boston, as the Boston Bruins have signed forward Pavel Zacha to a 4-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $4.75 million. Now, for the Bruins, this is a really good signing. They have a lot of current pending unrestricted free agents right now. There is a lot of uncertainty around the roster beyond this season. I know Pasternak's the big name when it comes to that. They also have a couple of lower-end guys like a Pavel Zacha, Craig Smith, Jake DeBrusk's only a year away from unrestricted free agency, so they have a lot of players on expiring deals right now. So getting Zacha signed is a pretty good move. Zacha was acquired from the New Jersey Devils in the offseason for Eric Howla, and the Bruins have really liked how this trade has gone. So far this season, Zacha has 5 goals and 25 points in 42 games. Now, Zacha's played only 40 games this year, and he looks like he could be on his way to smashing last year's career high when he had 15 goals and 36 points in 70 games. So, it does look like Zacha's fitting really well with Boston. Zacha's had 5 consecutive seasons putting up at least 25 points, and he's going to give you predictions probably between 30 and 40 if he can continue to do well. I mean, he's hit 30 for the last couple of years, so I definitely think that the extension for Zacha is good. It gives the Bruins another top 6 forward for the next couple of years, and the way Zacha's fit into that middle 6, I think this is a perfect signing. I think the cap hit probably could have been a little bit lower. I'm not really sure if Zacha's a close to $5 million player, but I still think, given how well he's fit with the Bruins and how well he's made that middle 6, I think that this signing is really great for both sides. So Zacha was a pending unrestricted free agent, so that takes him off the open market, and he's going to remain with the Bruins for the next couple of years. So good sign for Boston to be able to keep this good middle 6 piece. And for Zacha, he's fitting really well with Boston. So to continue that relationship, I think is a really great thing. And I think Zacha can continue to put up points this year, help Boston to a playoff spot, and maybe try and break his career high from last year. Over in Minnesota, there was another major extension. This one for a bit of a younger player, as young Wild forward Matthew Boldy was able to sign a 7-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $7 million with the Minnesota Wild. Now, Boldy is in the midst of his 2nd season in the NHL. He had a pretty good season in his rookie year, playing a lot with Kevin Fiala, and he was able to put up 15 goals and 39 points in 47 games, which was really good. And I think that second line for the Wild with Fiala and Boldy really was one of the driving forces for the Wild being such a good regular season team last year. But Fiala left this year. They never really replaced him. They replaced him internally, and Boldy's still doing pretty well even though he's not playing with Fiala. He currently has 12 goals and 29 points in 42 games. So he only has 10 less points and 5 less games. So he's still doing a really good job of being a really good point-producing top 6 forward for the Minnesota Wild. And if he continues to produce like this, maybe the Wild get a little bit more better in the supporting cast in the next couple of years. I could see Boldy being like a point-per-game player eventually. So I think the 7-year, $7 million deal is going to be possibly a really good steal for the Minnesota Wild eventually. Probably not right now, but I think in 2 to 3 years when he's really starting to produce at a very high level, that contract is going to look like a really, really good bargain for the Minnesota Wild. So good to get that done. I know that the Wild have a lot of cap problems right now. So signing him to a $7 million deal could mean that they have to move on from someone else. Like, I think it's very, very unlikely now that Matt Dumba stays beyond this season with the Minnesota Wild, and they may even have to do some other things as well. But getting Boldy signed, who's a good key piece of this team going forward, is huge, and I think that Boldy should continue to produce a top 6 role and continue to be a good driving force on that Minnesota Wild offense. So that's all the signings I want to get to. Now let's get over to the injury update part of the video. We'll start with the Colorado Avalanche, as they've had both good and bad news on the injury front. The Avalanche have done really good recently, winning a couple of games, getting themselves back in the playoff race, and they've definitely gotten a few more bodies back to help them with that. Goaltender Pavel Zacha, who we knew was out for a little bit with an injury, has been activated and has gone back into game action. Now, for the Avalanche, getting Zacha back is huge. Georgiev had to play the majority of the games while Zacha was out for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and getting Francouz back is really good. He's a good 1A, 1B goalie who can share starts with Georgiev. So getting Francouz back is huge. He's a really good goalie. I think he's one of the more underrated goalies in the NHL. And I think getting Francouz back is huge. It takes a little bit of the weight off of Georgiev. It allows them to put Johansson back in the minors and gives them 2 solid goaltenders again. So getting Francouz back is huge for the Avalanche. I think he should continue to do well. They also got Valeri Nichushkin back from his injury, and he was able to get back in the game action. Now, we know early in the season, Nichushkin suffered an injury. He was out for a while earlier in the year. He got back. He played for a few weeks, and then he got back to being injured again. So getting back Nichushkin is huge. He's another big piece of that top 6 for them. Getting him back into the lineup is going to be big. I know that Nichushkin played really well on the second line last year and was a key piece for the Avalanche's Stanley Cup run. And he's done really well this year as well. With guys like Burakovsky and Kadri not there anymore, he's taken a lot of big steps whenever he's been healthy. So getting him back in the lineup is big. It gives them a little bit more depth scoring, and it allows them to rework that roster for them to be a little bit more deep at the forward group. So that's huge news to get Nichushkin back, but they did lose a couple of forwards to injury as well. First off, Dennis Malgin, who was acquired just a few weeks ago from the Toronto Maple Leafs, had gone into a few NHL games with the Avalanche, was injured. He suffered an upper body injury and is out week to week right now. Malgin's been an unhealthy scratch for the last few games, so maybe he's not going to be out too long. Hopefully it's only like a week or two that this is. But it is possible that he could be out longer. So hopefully Malgin can get back soon. He's not the biggest of names in Colorado, but he's still a really good third-line speedy winger for the Avalanche. So losing him is not ideal, and hopefully he can get back in the game action soon and recover from his injury. As for Darren Helm, we know that he missed majority of the season so far. He got back in the last couple of weeks and was able to get back into game action and play some more games for the first time this year. Well, now he's been injured with an undisclosed injury, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time, and there is some concern that this is related to the injury that kept him out for majority of the early part of the season. So losing Helm is not good. He's not a good top 9 forward, but he's a really, really good bottom 6 forward. He plays a lot on the 4th line and can score some big goals. He's definitely showed that in the playoffs. Him and Cogliano were really good 4th liners for them in the Stanley Cup run last year, so losing Helm again is not going to be good for them. He's a good bottom 6 forward, and they're starting to run out of depth in Colorado. With guys like Landeskog still out. Now you're getting Malgin and Helm injured as well. That team's really, really battered and bruised right now. So hopefully those guys can come back soon. Hopefully their injuries don't take too long to recover from, because the Avalanche are still pushing pretty hard, but they have a really, really battered and bruised forward group. So if they can get some forwards back in the near future, I think the Avalanche will still be fine for making the playoffs. Over with the Columbus Blue Jackets, we talked about last week how they were still getting a lot of injuries, and guys like Carson Mayer and Gavrikov were injured, and there were a couple of other guys too. But now they have a handful of activations, and they've gotten a lot of players back from injury reserve. As they get Gavrikov back from his injury, as he was an unhealthy scratch, and they've activated Daniil Tarasov, Boone Jenner, Nick Blankenberg, and Eric Robinson off of injury reserve. Now this is really, really big news for the Blue Jackets, because those are a lot of key players getting back. Gavrikov is a good top 4 defenseman. He's played top 4 minutes this entire year, especially with top defenseman Zach Werenski out for a majority of the season. He's been thrown into the top pair role and really stepped up and done really good in that role. Nick Blankenberg is only in his first NHL season. He's missed the past couple of months due to an ankle injury. But before that, he looks like he could be eventually a good top 4 defenseman, and he's a good 3rd pair defenseman right now. So, especially with guys like Werenski injured and Bean injured, getting Blankenberg back into the lineup is huge, and it's an important addition for the Blue Jackets' blue line. The Jackets' goaltending core has been injured for a little bit, including Korpisalo, who's been in and out of the lineup over the past couple of weeks. So getting Tarasov back is good. It allows them to not have to call up Jet Greaves. Korpisalo is not available to them. And it gives them another good backup in Tarasov. You know, Tarasov's probably should be developing in the minors instead of being a backup at the NHL level. But if they were to have a backup, I think they would rather have Tarasov than Greaves. So getting Tarasov back to help round out their goaltending depth is good. And then on the forward group, you got Jenner and Robinson. Jenner's missed about 3-4 weeks due to an injury. Getting him back is huge. He's been the one who's played majority of the season with Gaudreau and Laine when they've been healthy. So getting Jenner back is huge. On top of that, getting Robinson back in the game action is really, really good for the Jackets. I know that Robinson is not the best of forwards in Columbus, but he's a good third-pair player in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. Really does a lot. He also helps on the penalty kill, and he's a really good speedy winger. So getting him back into the game action is huge. I think adding guys like Robinson, Jenner, Gavrikov, Blankenberg, and Tarasov back into this lineup makes them a lot more better. I know they still have a lot of injuries, like you got Voracek and Danforth, and you got Werenski and Bean, so there's still a ton of injuries for the Blue Jackets, but getting a handful of more lower-end guys back in the lineup is huge, and I think if they can continue to get a little more healthier, maybe they can get a bit more competitive, as they're last in the East right now and one of the lower teams in the NHL, so hopefully they can get to a little bit more competitive and win a couple of games, but getting healthy is a huge win for them. I know they've been really banged up this year, so good for them to get some more healthy bodies, and hopefully they can continue to be a little bit more competitive. Over with the Toronto Maple Leafs, they have had also a few injury updates as they were able to get back Austin Matthews off of injury, but they did have horrible injury news for forward Nick Robertson and defenseman Mac Hollowell. Now for Matthews, he had missed the past few games due to an injury, and we didn't really know when his return would be, but he did return for the weekend, and he's gone back into game action, so good news for Matthews. I know missing a few games wasn't easy for the team. They definitely had to have their depth roles step up with their top line center being out, but getting Matthews back in the lineup was really, really good. I know the Maple Leafs are still in second in the Atlantic Division, really, really hunting for the top spot in Boston, still a little ways away, so getting all the wins they can is important, and Matthews is going to help with that a huge amount. So getting Matthews back in the lineup is really important for the Maple Leafs. As for the injuries, those are going to be long-term injuries. Nick Robertson had shoulder surgery, and he's going to be out for the next 6 months, which puts him out until somewhere around June or July. So going to be really, really difficult for Robertson. He's out for the season now, so horrible news for him, and hopefully he recovers well from that injury and gets to training camp next year and can try and earn a top 9 role for the Maple Leafs. But another big blow to Robertson. I know he missed a lot of time last year due to injuries, and he can't seem to stay healthy and stay in an NHL role right now. So hopefully Robertson can get healthy and get back next year. As for Hollowell, he's been injured with a knee injury, and he's going to be out for the next 3 months. So that puts him out until sometime around April or May. With the Maple Leafs depth on their D-core, I don't think it's really too surprising that if he doesn't get into any NHL action. They have a big long list of defensemen, and there's possibility that they could acquire another one before the trade deadline. So even though Holloway could still be back before the season ends, I still think it's really, really unlikely that Hollowell winds up playing another NHL game in this season. But bad news for him to get injured. Definitely bad news for Robertson. Hopefully these two can get back in the game action soon. But definitely good to get Matthews back in the lineup, and hopefully the Leafs can continue to be a dominant team in the Atlantic Division. Next to the Chicago Blackhawks, they got a few guys back recently, as Patrick Kane and Mackenzie Entwistle were both activated off of injury reserve and got back into game action. For Kane, it's a big win for the Blackhawks. We know that he had some sort of an injury, and it could be lingering, but he was healthy enough to get back into game action over the weekend, so good for him. I know that the Blackhawks are definitely going to possibly try and shop him and maybe trade him before the deadline. So getting him back and showing all the other teams that he's still healthy and can produce at a high level is going to be good for the Hawks. Hopefully they can get a good return for him if he can continue to do well. As for Entwistle, he's not as big of an addition as Kane is, but he's still a pretty good one. He's been a really good bomb six forward for the Blackhawks this year, playing majority on the fourth line, but he looks like he could be a decent bomb six forward in a year or two. So getting him back to play on the fourth line, continue to develop really well, is going to be good for the Blackhawks. I know they don't have too much depth, so getting Kane and Entwistle back for the Hawks is really good. I think Kane should continue to just go back into a top six role and show how good he is. Entwistle should continue to be a bomb six player, continue to put up some points and show the Hawks that he could be a piece of their future. So good to get both Kane and Entwistle back. And finally here with the Vancouver Canucks, they had a few injury updates and one that was really, really bad. So we found out over the past week that Tanner Pearson is going to miss the entirety of the season due to a hand injury. Now, Pearson had surgery on his hand a little while ago when he first got injured, which was like a month and a half, 2 months ago. And since then, he's actually had 2 more hand surgeries, which is quite surprising. And it's definitely not been handled well by the Vancouver Canucks. Definitely a lot of speculation as to what went wrong with the Pearson recovery. And it does sound like Pearson may have to have even more surgeries in the future. There's also some speculation that his career could also be in jeopardy as well. So hopefully Pearson can figure out what the problems are and get all of his surgery taken care of, and he doesn't have to go back and have more surgeries. And hopefully Pearson can return at some point next season. Hopefully he can still be healthy and a good player for the Vancouver Canucks. As for the other injury, Canucks lost Travis Dermott due to injury, and he's going to be out with an undisclosed injury for an unknown period of time. Now, Dermott was a really good third pair defenseman. He had been missed a lot of time this year due to injuries, but he was able to get back just before the Christmas break. And losing him for the next little while is not going to be ideal. I know the Canucks don't have a really great blue line right now, so hopefully Dermott can eventually get back into game action. But for the time being, it does sound like he's going to miss at least a little bit of time. It's an unknown timeline, so really hard to predict when he would be back, but hopefully Dermott can return in the near future and help that Canucks blue line, which hasn't done really well this year. So that's all the injury updates we're going to talk about today. Now let's go over to the trade rumor part of the video. We'll start with the Arizona Coyotes. As over the weekend, there was definitely a lot of talk that the Arizona Coyotes would be willing to consider a Karel Vejmelka trade. Now, Vejmelka is the Arizona Coyotes starter, and he wasn't even in the NHL until last year. Arizona brought in Vejmelka last year and gave him a 1-year deal to see how well he did, and he played in 51 games, which is well over half of the games for the Arizona Coyotes last year, putting up a 3.68 goals against average and an .898 save percentage, which isn't too good, but given the fact he was on one of the worst teams in the NHL, he actually did quite well, especially playing a majority of their games. And then he carried his success into this year, as in 31 games, he's had a 3.38 goals against average and a .902 save percentage. So with Vejmelka playing as one of the better goalies in the NHL, especially on a lower end Arizona team, there is a lot of speculation that he could end up being traded. Now, he was signed just before last year's trade deadline to a 3-year, $2.73 million deal, and he's in the first year of that right now. So a team who was acquiring him will be getting a pretty good starting goaltender for this year, plus 2 more seasons. So definitely would be interesting to see if anyone would be willing to trade for him. I know there's probably a few teams who would probably have interest. I know the LA Kings have a lot of questions in nets, especially with Cal Peterson not doing too well. Could they maybe swap Peterson and Vejmelka? There's no rumors suggesting that was just my thought, but possibly could LA have some interest in Vejmelka? There's probably a few other teams out there who would probably like an upgraded net. I'm not exactly sure what could be done before the trade deadline, but I definitely think that there would definitely be some teams interested in Vejmelka. Now, like we said, Vejmelka still has this year plus 2 more seasons on his deal, so Arizona's not going to be pressured to move him before this deadline. So if he was going to be moved before the deadline this year, I would think it would have to take a pretty nice package to pry him out of Arizona. I would probably say something like a 2nd-round pick and a decent prospect would be my guess, just off the top of my head. But Vejmelka's shown over the past year and a half that he's a really, really good goaltender and can be a starter in the NHL. And for a team who's looking at their goaltending situation and seeming like they could have some goalie problems, Vejmelka could be the answer, and Arizona could be willing to trade him. So definitely a name to keep our eye on, as Vejmelka rumors will probably continue over the next 4 to 6 weeks before the trade deadline. I know some other names just here quickly to keep your eye on in Arizona would be guys like Nick Bjugstad, good bottom 6 forward on a cheap contract. Nick Ritchie, who's shown that he's a good 3rd-line forward, also on an expiring deal. Shane Gostisbehere, who's been a really good offensive defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes. He's also on an expiring deal. Jacob Chikrin, who we've talked about for a while and no one wants out of Arizona, but the asking price is holding up that sort of a deal. And then you've also got a couple of depth defensemen like a Troy Stecher or Josh Brown, who could be good depth additions for a playoff team. So definitely a lot of names to keep our eyes on in Arizona. I would like to know what you think. Do you think that Vejmelka does end up getting traded before deadline? And if so, what team do you think could be a good fit for Vejmelka? Over in Seattle, there's been a lot of recent speculation that with the Kraken doing extremely well this year, they could be buyers going into the trade line. Now, I don't think many people saw this. I, for one, speculated that the Kraken would be around the 500 mark and do a lot better than they did in their first year, but they wouldn't make the playoffs. But they are really sitting well right now in the Pacific Division. Currently tied with the LA Kings for second, and breathing down Vegas' next for first in the Pacific. And they were just coming off an 8-game winning streak, winning 7 straight on the road. So that's an amazing feat for the Seattle Kraken. And the Kraken have done extremely well this year. And it does seem like going into the trade line, they could use some of their draft capital to acquire some players. It does sound like the two main areas of improvement they could probably target would be their center position and their defensive position. There's been a lot of rumblings over the past couple weeks that the Kraken are a really good face-off team, so acquiring a good center who could help them would be good. I know that they've sort of been linked to Bo Horvat, as some speculated that maybe he would be a good fit in Seattle. I know that Elliot Friedman, on one of his blogs, said that he could see Seattle maybe can play for Sam Reinhart from Florida. So there's definitely a few players that could be of interest on the forward group. I also think that defense is really overly great right now. I know Vince Dunn's done absolutely fantastic, and Larson and Alexiak are doing really well as well. But as a group, I think they're definitely a bit lacking on the defensive end. And I think maybe getting a guy who can play in their top 4, maybe on the right side, would help. Maybe a guy like a Matt Dumba or John Klingberg, if they were to be willing to try and trade for one of them. But I definitely think that trying to acquire a defenseman and a center is definitely a huge possibility. There's a lot of speculation that because this is such a very deep draft, and next year's isn't as deep as this year's, that second round picks for this year's draft will be wanted more in trades than first round picks in next year's draft, which does make a lot of sense given how deep and good this draft is. So given the fact Seattle has their own, the Maple Leafs, and the Jets' second round picks, it's definitely possible that they could wind up moving maybe one or two of their second round picks to acquire something that they feel like they need, whether it be a middle six center or a top 4 defenseman. But definitely think that Seattle's going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on. I don't think they'll do anything really imminent right now. But closer to the deadline, I do think that a center and a defenseman will definitely be possibly on the radar for the Seattle Kraken to be adding to this team. And I definitely think that the Kraken will definitely try to improve this team as much as they can before the trade line to try and make this team as competitive as they can for possibly their first ever playoff appearance. And lastly, with the Winnipeg Jets here, there was some talk on the most recent TSN Insider Trading that the Winnipeg Jets could wind up being buyers this year. Now, they had a lot of injuries earlier in the year. They were playing really banged up, but the Jets were able to get through that, and they got through that while still being second place in the Central Division, which is absolutely stunning. I thought they would not do well all this year. I thought they would have been one of the bottom dwellers of the NHL this year, and the fact that they're one of the better teams in the Central is quite surprising to me, as they don't really have the best of forward groups, and they didn't really make much changes in the offseason, so I didn't think they would do this well this year, but definitely think that the getting a lot healthier recently has also been helping. They got Wheeler back recently, Nate Schmidt was another one, Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers, who's missed most of the season, so they've gotten a lot more healthier now, and there is some thought that they could wind up being buyers at the trade deadline. They do have a bit of cap space, which is something that some of the other teams do not have, and maybe they go out and acquire someone. I think if there was to be one specific position, I would think the Jets would probably want to upgrade. It would probably be a top 9 forward. I know that they've used guys like Seku Manalainen and Sam Gagner in their top 9 when they've had a majority of a healthy lineup. But I definitely think if they were to add another top 9 forward who could possibly play top 6 minutes if a Wheeler or a Perfetti went down again, I think that would be probably a place where they could try and improve. And though they've been some link to Jonathan Toews, given the fact he's from Winnipeg, but there's no guarantee that Toews has even moved from the Blackhawks. But there's also definitely been a couple of other teams that have been speculated. I know Montreal has a lot of forwards, and that the Jets have been linked to maybe acquiring a Canadiens forward. So there's definitely a few options there for the Winnipeg Jets. I also wouldn't rule out maybe upgrading on the blue line. I know there was some talk that maybe Provorov would be a good landing spot in Winnipeg. I know that maybe the Jets would end up getting interested in Chychrun. I know Chychrun's a really, really tough asking price right now, but maybe if they wanted a big enough addition, maybe they'll go after Chychrun. So I definitely think that a blue line upgrade or adding to that top 9 would be of interest for the Winnipeg Jets. And given their position in the Central right now and how good they've been this year, I would not be surprised if they went to go and try and add to this team and make them a really good, lethal team come the playoffs. But definitely like to know what you think. Do you think Winnipeg is a buyer at the trade line? And if so, do they add on the defense, the forward group? And which player do you think they may add? So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will leave a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.